Our world is filled with breathtaking wonders that inspire awe, but lurking beneath the surface of these picture-perfect landscapes often lies a dark, surreal, and deeply hostile reality. The travel industry aggressively sells us the illusion of accessible beauty, curating pristine images of crystal-clear lakes, vibrant mountains, and exotic islands. But what happens when nature itself becomes an unpredictable, beautiful trap? The 25 locations you are about to witness are not merely tourist attractions. They are extreme geographical anomalies that aggressively defy logic, physics, and sometimes human survival. These are places that look like they were violently ripped from the pages of a science fiction novel, landscapes so impossibly toxic, brutally desolate, or fundamentally alien that your brain will struggle to process their existence. Behind the stunning, saturated colors and unique geological formations are environments that can boil you alive, silently poison the air you breathe, or leave you completely stranded in an infinite, hallucinatory void. Today, we are taking you on a deeply unnerving descent into the 25 most impossible places on Earth that look beautiful, but are actively trying to kill you. Before we cross the threshold into these surreal death zones, please let us know in the comments, what country are you watching this from? #25. Spotted Lake, Canada. Spotted Lake in British Columbia, Canada. During the cold winter and mild spring months, this body of water appears perfectly normal, hiding its deeply alien nature beneath a placid surface. But as the scorching summer sun violently bakes the oh-so-used desert valley, the lake aggressively begins to evaporate, revealing a deeply unnerving, trypophobia-inducing landscape. The massive evaporation process leaves behind a bizarre, closely packed network of hundreds of massive, circular briny pools, separated by fragile, highly crystallized walkways of raw minerals. The water in these strange dotted craters turns violently vibrant shades of toxic-looking yellow, deep green, and bruised purple, depending entirely on the specific heavy mineral concentration of magnesium sulfate, calcium, and sodium sulfates. It looks exactly like a giant, bubbling petri dish belonging to a mad scientist. While visually mesmerizing, the environment is intensely hostile to almost all forms of life. The water is so aggressively saturated with heavy minerals that it is completely undrinkable and practically corrosive to the touch. Walking across the fragile, crystallized salt bridges is strictly prohibited, not only to protect the sacred site, but because a sudden collapse would plunge you into deep, highly caustic brine that can severely irritate your skin and trap you in thick, suffocating mud. Spotted Lake is a stunning, otherworldly anomaly that serves as a harsh, silent reminder that beautiful colors in nature are almost always a universal warning sign of extreme toxicity. 24 Fly Geyser, USA. Fly Geyser in the remote Black Rock Desert of Nevada, USA. This aggressively towering, brightly colored geological freak is an incredibly rare, catastrophic accident, born from human error colliding violently with extreme geothermal pressure. In 1964, a geothermal energy company recklessly drilled a test well and either failed to cap it properly or severely underestimated the raw, explosive power of the boiling water beneath the desert floor. The result is a terrifying, constantly erupting geyser that violently spews scalding, 200-degree Fahrenheit water over 5 feet into the air, 24 hours a day, without ever stopping. The continuously falling, heavily mineralized water has actively built massive, alien-looking travertine mounds that are completely covered in thermophilic algae, giving the entire structure a bruised, intensely vibrant red and green appearance. It looks exactly like a throbbing, fleshy organ pulsating in the middle of the barren desert. The danger here is immediate and visceral. The aggressively erupting water is boiling hot and completely unpredictable, and the fragile, slippery mineral terraces surrounding the geyser are prone to sudden collapse. A single, careless misstep into one of the boiling, emerald green pools dotting the base of the mound would result in catastrophic, third-degree thermal burns in a matter of seconds. Fly Geyser is a beautiful, hissing nightmare of extreme geothermal violence, a stark reminder that when humans recklessly puncture the Earth's crust, nature responds with terrifying, uncontrollable force. Eternal Flame Falls, USA. The Eternal Flame Falls in New York, USA. Hidden deep within the dark, suffocating confines of the Shale Creek Preserve, this seemingly tranquil, picturesque waterfall harbors a deeply unsettling, unnatural secret. Nestled directly behind the cascading curtain of freezing, rushing water is a small, claustrophobic rocky grotto that constantly emits a highly flammable, invisible, and toxic natural gas. Deep within the Earth, intense, crushing geological pressure forces methane gas up through microfractures in the shale rock, creating an environment that violently contradicts basic logic, a persistent, flickering fire burning aggressively right in the middle of a flowing waterfall. While the isolated flame itself is visually enchanting, the unseen danger lurking in this narrow, steep ravine is suffocating. The air in the immediate vicinity is often thick with the invisible, noxious fumes of concentrated methane. During periods of low water flow or highly stagnant air, the toxic gas can rapidly accumulate in the tight, rocky basin. Lingering too long in this confined, unventilated space can easily induce severe dizziness, intense nausea, and critical oxygen deprivation without any visible warning. Furthermore, the steep, heavily moss-covered shale rocks leading down to the falls are notoriously slick and unstable, turning a simple hike into a treacherous, bone-breaking slip hazard. The eternal flame is a haunting, paradoxical marvel where the terrifying elements of aggressive fire, rushing water, and invisible, suffocating gas violently converge in one tiny, isolated space. Champagne Pool, New Zealand. The Champagne Pool in Waiotapu, New Zealand. Do not let the luxurious, celebratory name of this massive geothermal hot spring deceive you. This is not a place for relaxation. This staggering, 213-foot wide crater is a highly lethal, aggressively bubbling cauldron of boiling acid. The mesmerizing, deep emerald green waters are constantly effervescing with massive amounts of invisible carbon dioxide gas, giving it the terrifying appearance of a giant glass of boiling toxic champagne. The pool is violently ringed by a vibrant, bruised-looking crust of bright orange, which is actually a massive, hardened deposit of highly toxic arsenic and antimony sulfides. The sheer scale of the geothermal activity is deeply intimidating. The surface water temperature consistently hovers around a scalding 165 degrees Fahrenheit, while deep below the surface, the superheated fluid reaches an explosive 500 degrees. The thick, suffocating steam that constantly rolls off the boiling surface is heavily laced with toxic hydrogen sulfide, smelling strongly of rotten eggs and capable of causing severe respiratory distress if inhaled for prolonged periods. The fragile, crumbling silica terraces surrounding the terrifying pool are highly deceptive. A single misplaced step can easily break through the thin crust, violently plunging your leg directly into the boiling, acidic mud below, guaranteeing catastrophic, flesh-melting burns. The Champagne Pool is a stunning, highly toxic chemical weapon disguised as a natural wonder, demanding absolute respect and severe caution from a very safe distance. Lake Natron, Tanzania. Lake Natron in the desolate, remote region of northern Tanzania. This massive, blood-red body of water is arguably the most terrifying and inherently hostile lake on the entire planet. Fed by highly mineral-rich hot springs, The lake's water is so aggressively saturated with sodium carbonate and other toxic minerals that its pH level can easily spike above 12, making it almost as caustic as pure, industrial-grade ammonia. The intense, blistering African sun actively accelerates massive evaporation, turning the shallow, stagnant water into a thick, highly corrosive alkaline sludge that looks like a vast pool of fresh crimson blood. This surreal, terrifying environment literally turns living creatures into stone. Birds and bats that mistakenly crash into the highly reflective, mirror-like surface of the lethal water are quickly killed by the severe chemical burns. Their corpses are then rapidly calcified by the extreme sodium carbonate concentration, perfectly preserving them as macabre, hardened statues of salt scattered along the desolate white shoreline. The suffocating ambient temperature frequently exceeds 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and the thick, toxic alkaline dust, violently whipped up by the desert wind, severely burns the eyes and lungs of anyone daring to approach. Lake Natron is an apocalyptic, terrifyingly silent wasteland, a beautiful but highly lethal chemical bath that actively petrifies the dead and brutally punishes the living. Jeju Island, South Korea. Jeju Island in South Korea. Frequently marketed as a romantic, idyllic honeymoon paradise, this massive volcanic island hides a deeply treacherous, subterranean labyrinth that actively defies the peaceful scenery above. Beneath the lush green forests and serene coastlines lies the Manjangal Cave System, one of the longest and most structurally complex lava tubes on the planet. Forged thousands of years ago by violent rivers of superheated, rapidly flowing magma, exploring these dark ancient arteries is an exercise in profound claustrophobia and hidden danger. While a small section is open to tourists, the vast, unlit majority of the 5-mile-long tunnel system is a terrifying, pitch-black maze filled with unpredictable hazards. The jagged, razor-sharp walls of hardened basalt rock violently threaten to shred the skin of anyone careless enough to brush against them. The suffocatingly damp, unventilated air is chillingly cold, and the uneven floor is heavily riddled with sudden deep sinkholes and extremely slippery, moisture-slicked slopes. If you wander off the designated path and your flashlight fails, you will be instantly swallowed by an absolute, crushing darkness where the terrifyingly silent isolation is absolute. Navigating this jagged, subterranean nightmare without expert guidance guarantees getting hopelessly lost in a freezing, geological prison where the crushing weight of thousands of tons of volcanic rock hangs precariously inches above your head. Jeju Island may be a sun-drenched paradise on the surface, but its hollow core is a dark, freezing trap designed to swallow the unprepared. Antelope Canyon, USA. Antelope Canyon in Arizona, USA. Widely celebrated as a photographer's absolute dream, This mesmerizing slot canyon is famous for its smooth, elegantly sweeping sandstone walls that glow with deeply vibrant, ethereal shades of fiery orange and purple. However, this stunning, highly photogenic geological masterpiece is actually a terrifying, highly efficient natural drain pipe designed to aggressively funnel catastrophic amounts of water. The canyon was violently carved over thousands of years by the brutal force of flash floods, and that same obliterating force remains an ever-present, lethal threat today. The true terror of Antelope Canyon lies in its horrific unpredictability. A severe thunderstorm occurring dozens of miles away, completely out of sight and sound, can suddenly unleash a massive, fast-moving wall of raging, muddy water down the narrow, twisting gorge. Because the canyon walls are agonizingly tight and incredibly deep, there is absolutely no higher ground, no escape route, and virtually no warning. In a matter of mere seconds, the dry, sandy floor transforms into a violent, roaring washing machine of churning debris, heavy logs, and crushing water pressure. In 1997, 11 tourists were suddenly and violently swept away to their deaths by a catastrophic flash flood that completely submerged the canyon almost instantly. Antelope Canyon is a breathtakingly beautiful optical illusion that aggressively lures you deep into its narrow, winding belly, only to occasionally flush it out with unstoppable, obliterating violence. Death Valley, USA. Death Valley in California, USA. The deeply ominous name of this vast, sprawling basin is an incredibly accurate warning, not a dramatic exaggeration. Situated hundreds of feet below sea level, this colossal barren trench is widely recognized as the hottest and driest geographical location on Earth. Surrounded by steep, towering mountain ranges that actively trap and aggressively superheat the stagnant air, Death Valley operates exactly like a massive, natural convection oven. During the brutal summer months, ambient temperatures frequently soar well above a suffocating 120 degrees Fahrenheit, while the baked, cracking ground temperature can easily reach a mind-numbing 200 degrees, capable of literally melting the rubber soles of your hiking boots. The extreme, unyielding heat aggressively attacks the human body, rapidly inducing severe dehydration, violent heat stroke, and critical organ failure in a matter of mere hours. The landscape is a deeply terrifying void of cracked salt flats, massive, shifting sand dunes, and razor-sharp badlands, completely devoid of shade, reliable water, or any cellular reception. If your vehicle experiences a sudden mechanical failure on one of the isolated, unpaved back roads, you are immediately thrust into a desperate, high-stakes battle for your life. Death Valley is a visually stunning, stark masterpiece of extreme desolation, but it is an unforgiving, silent killer that sadistically punishes the absolute slightest underestimation of its raw, scorching power. Easter Island, Chile. Easter Island in Chile. Floating in the crushing, absolute isolation of the vast Pacific Ocean, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited landmass. This remote speck of volcanic rock is famously guarded by nearly 1,000 massive, brooding stone statues known as moai. While these colossal, monolithic heads draw awestruck tourists from around the globe, they stand as a chilling, silent monument to one of the most terrifying self-inflicted ecological collapses in human history. The true horror of Easter Island is not geological. It is profoundly psychological and historical. The island was once covered in lush, dense palm forests, but the native Rapa Nui people aggressively and relentlessly deforested their entire home, likely to build the massive wooden sleds required to transport the giant stone statues. This obsessive, catastrophic destruction of their own ecosystem led to extreme soil erosion, total agricultural failure, and the complete annihilation of the local wildlife. What followed was a brutal, terrifying descent into mass starvation, violent tribal warfare, and desperate cannibalism. Standing on the barren, wind-scoured plains of Easter Island today, looking up at the towering, silent stone faces, you are forced to confront a deeply unsettling, apocalyptic reality. The island is an isolated, haunting graveyard that serves as a brutal, terrifying warning to all of humanity. A stark, inescapable demonstration of what happens when a society aggressively consumes every last resource to the absolute point of total, irreversible collapse. Vinicunca Rainbow Mountain, Peru. Vinicunca, famously known as the Rainbow Mountain in the Peruvian Andes. Plastered across millions of highly saturated, heavily filtered social media posts, this mountain appears as a surreal, candy-colored dreamscape, striped with vibrant layers of turquoise, lavender, and gold. However, the journey to witness this breathtaking geological phenomenon is a brutal, physically crushing ordeal that actively pushes the human body to its absolute physiological breaking point. The terrifying reality of Vinicunca is its staggering, suffocating altitude. Situated at an incomprehensible elevation of over 17,000 feet, nearly the same altitude as the Everest Base Camp, the air here is agonizingly thin, containing only half the oxygen found at sea level. The incredibly strenuous, steep hike aggressively strips the breath from your lungs, inducing severe altitude sickness, paralyzing nausea, and crippling migraines even in physically fit, highly experienced trekkers. The weather is violently unpredictable and deeply hostile. A sunny, deceptively calm ascent can instantaneously transform into a blinding, freezing blizzard or a terrifying high-altitude thunderstorm accompanied by lethal, ground-striking lightning. Furthermore, the massive influx of unprepared tourists has severely degraded the fragile, high-altitude trails, creating dangerous, slippery mud pits along steep, unprotected drop-offs. The Rainbow Mountain is a stunning, vividly painted masterpiece of mineral deposits, but it aggressively demands a terrifying toll of physical suffering and extreme respiratory distress, brutally punishing those who attempt to conquer it without immense preparation. The Wave, USA. The Wave in the Coyote Buttes North area of Arizona, USA. This aggressively restricted, profoundly isolated geological formation is one of the most highly coveted and exclusive hiking destinations on the planet, with access severely limited by a brutal, high-stakes lottery system. Visually, the Wave is a mesmerizing, undulating masterpiece of Navajo sandstone, featuring violently swirling, fiery orange and deep crimson striations that actively create a dizzying, hypnotic optical illusion of constant motion. However, reaching this surreal wave-like anomaly requires navigating a deeply hostile, completely trackless wilderness that actively preys on human vulnerability. There is absolutely no marked trail, no cellular reception, and zero natural shade or reliable water sources along the grueling 6-mile round trip. The terrifying reality of the wave is its capacity to induce severe, fatal disorientation in the unforgiving desert heat. The sprawling, featureless, slick rock landscape reflects and aggressively amplifies the scorching sun, frequently pushing ambient temperatures well past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Without expert navigational skills and a massive supply of water, hikers can easily become hopelessly lost in a mesmerizing but lethal maze of identical, swirling stone corridors. Multiple tourists have tragically perished here, collapsing from severe heat stroke and rapid dehydration after making a single, microscopic navigational error. The wave is an impossibly beautiful, hypnotic siren song carved in stone, sadistically luring hikers into a brutal, unforgiving desert death trap. Blood Falls, Antarctica. Blood Falls in the McMurdo Dry Valleys of Antarctica. Located in one of the most violently extreme, unforgiving, and desolate environments on Earth, this terrifying natural anomaly looks exactly like a gruesome apocalyptic crime scene. Against the blinding, pristine white backdrop of the massive Taylor Glacier, a shockingly vibrant, deeply crimson liquid violently bleeds directly out of the cracked, frozen ice face, heavily staining the desolate landscape with a 5-story tall cascade of what appears to be fresh, liquid gore. The terrifying visual impact of Blood Falls is profoundly unsettling, triggering a primal, instinctual reaction of deep dread. While modern science has revealed that the blood is actually a hypersaline, subglacial brine aggressively saturated with iron oxide that instantly rusts upon violently colliding with the oxygen-rich air, the reality of its origin is equally terrifying. This bizarre blood-red liquid is being violently squeezed out from a dark, completely isolated subglacial lake trapped beneath millions of tons of crushing ice for over 2 million years. The environment surrounding Blood Falls is a brutally cold, hyper-arid polar desert where hurricane-force katabatic winds actively strip the flesh from your bones, and the temperature rarely climbs above freezing. It is a haunting, deeply visceral reminder that even in the most sterile, frozen, and seemingly dead environments on the planet, the Earth is still capable of violently bleeding. Mono Lake Tufa Towers, USA. Mono Lake Tufa Towers in California, USA. Stepping onto the desolate, heavily crusted shores of Mono Lake is like being suddenly teleported to the toxic, barren surface of a hostile alien planet. This ancient, intensely alkaline lake is aggressively dominated by a bizarre, jagged army of towering calcium carbonate spires known as tufa towers. These grotesque, heavily textured structures aggressively thrust upwards from the milky, highly reflective water, looking exactly like the calcified skeletal remains of massive, prehistoric beasts or the crumbling ruins of a long-dead extraterrestrial civilization. The sheer hostility of Mono Lake lies in its aggressively extreme water chemistry. Due to decades of aggressive water diversion and massive evaporation, the lake has become a concentrated, highly toxic chemical soup. It is roughly 3 times saltier than the open ocean and so aggressively alkaline that it feels exactly like slippery soap, heavily laced with lethal levels of arsenic and other toxic heavy minerals. The water is completely devoid of all fish, supporting only a swarming, writhing biomass of microscopic brine shrimp and aggressively biting alkali flies that completely coat the shoreline in a thick, dark, buzzing blanket. Swimming in this heavily concentrated, caustic sludge is a highly unpleasant, burning experience that can severely irritate any exposed skin or mucous membranes. Mono Lake is a stunning, deeply surreal masterpiece of geological decay, a haunting, toxic wasteland that actively showcases the terrifying skeletal beauty of extreme environmental degradation. 12. Aokigahara Suicide Forest, Japan. Aokigahara Forest, deeply entrenched at the northwestern base of Mount Fuji, Japan. Globally infamous by its terrifying bleak moniker, the Suicide Forest. This incredibly dense, aggressively sprawling woodland is arguably the most profoundly unsettling and psychologically oppressive location on Earth. Growing violently over a massive bed of jagged, hardened volcanic rock from an ancient eruption, the forest floor is a treacherous, heavily uneven maze of deep crevices and twisting, exposed roots that actively threaten to snap your ankles with every step. The extreme density of the twisted, closely packed trees aggressively blocks out the sun, plunging the forest into a chilling, suffocating twilight even during the middle of the day. The terrifying reality of Aokigahara is its unnatural, absolute silence. The dense foliage aggressively absorbs all ambient noise, completely stripping away the sounds of birds or wind, creating a heavy, dead atmosphere that rapidly induces severe anxiety and deep paranoia. Furthermore, the massive deposits of magnetic iron in the volcanic soil actively severely scramble compasses and GPS devices, ensuring that anyone who wanders off the designated trail becomes instantly and hopelessly lost in the twisting, identical green abyss. The forest is hauntingly littered with deeply unsettling remnants, discarded clothes, faded personal items, and tragic warning signs desperately urging people to reconsider their lives. Aokigahara is a beautiful but deeply cursed labyrinth, a suffocating, silent prison that aggressively plays on the darkest, most terrifying fears of the human psyche. Sedlec Ossuary, Czech Republic. The Sedlec Ossuary in Kutná Hora, Czech Republic. While the other locations on this list aggressively terrify you with extreme geological forces or toxic chemistry, this small, unassuming Roman Catholic chapel actively confronts you with the absolute, inescapable reality of human mortality. From the outside, it is a remarkably ordinary, peaceful Gothic church. But step inside, and you are immediately thrust into a deeply unsettling, morbid masterpiece constructed entirely from the bleached, disarticulated skeletal remains of an estimated 40,000 to 70,000 human beings. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the macabre artistry is deeply paralyzing. Every single surface is aggressively heavily adorned with human bones. Massive, terrifying garlands of skulls aggressively drape from the vaulted ceilings. Towering, imposing chalices constructed entirely from femurs and pelvic bones flank the main altar. The horrific centerpiece is an absolutely colossal, heavily detailed chandelier that violently incorporates at least one of every single bone in the human body, hanging menacingly over the heads of awestruck visitors. This terrifying bone church is the result of mass graves from the devastating Black Death and the Hussite Wars being exhumed and violently repurposed by a woodcarver in the 19th century. Walking through the dimly lit, chillingly silent chapel is a profoundly visceral, claustrophobic experience. You are completely surrounded by thousands of hollow, empty eye sockets staring blankly back at you, a brutal, undeniable, and deeply terrifying reminder that no matter how beautifully arranged, death is the ultimate, unstoppable consequence for us all. Lake Hillier, Australia. Lake Hillier in Western Australia. Viewed from high above, this startling geographical anomaly looks exactly like a massive pool of toxic, bubblegum pink chemical waste violently spilled onto the pristine edge of a lush, dark green island. The profound visual contrast is deeply unsettling, immediately triggering a primal suspicion that something here is fundamentally wrong. Despite its highly artificial, synthetic appearance, the aggressive pink color is entirely natural, created by a massive, swarming concentration of halobacteria and Dunaliella salina microalgae. The true hostility of Lake Hillier is masked by its sweet, candy-like appearance. The water is aggressively hypersaline, containing salt concentrations that rival or even exceed the Dead Sea. Wading into this thick pink sludge feels like swimming in warm, viscous syrup. While not immediately lethal to humans, the extreme salinity makes it a deeply inhospitable dead zone for almost all macroscopic marine life. Furthermore, the island is incredibly isolated and surrounded by dense, nearly impenetrable eucalyptus forests and the treacherous, shark-infested waters of the Southern Ocean. There are absolutely no roads, no tourist facilities, and no easy ways to access the lake by foot. Getting stranded near Lake Hillier means being completely cut off from civilization, surrounded by a surreal pink biological soup that you cannot drink, leaving you entirely at the mercy of the brutal Australian wilderness. 9. Hand of the Desert, Chile. The Hand of the Desert, violently thrusting out of the scorched earth in the Atacama Desert, Chile. Located in the absolute driest, non-polar desert on the entire planet, this towering 36-foot-tall monument is a deeply unsettling, apocalyptic sight. It looks exactly like the desperate, petrified hand of a buried giant, violently reaching out from the desolate sands, screaming for a rescue that will never arrive. The terrifying reality of this location is the crushing, absolute emptiness that surrounds it. The Atacama Desert is a brutal, alien landscape, so aggressively devoid of moisture that certain areas have not recorded a single drop of rain in centuries. The towering, isolated hand serves as a grim, silent monument to human vulnerability, perfectly encapsulating the profound psychological terror of being completely swallowed by the immense, unforgiving void of the desert. The ambient temperature fluctuates violently, scorching you with unbearable, blistering heat during the day, and aggressively plummeting to bone-chilling, freezing temperatures the moment the sun drops below the horizon. There are absolutely no shade, no water, and no shelter from the blinding, abrasive sandstorms that frequently tear across the barren plains. approaching the hand of the desert is an exercise in extreme, agonizing isolation, a stark reminder that in the face of the Earth's most hostile, uncompromising environments, humanity is vanishingly small and terrifyingly fragile. Eight, Island of the Dolls, Mexico. The Island of the Dolls, Isla de las Muñecas, in Xochimilco, Mexico. Tucked away deep within a dark, twisting labyrinth of ancient Aztec canals, this small, heavily forested island is a deeply terrifying, profoundly cursed nightmare brought to life. It is not aggressive geography or lethal weather that makes this place dangerous, but the paralyzing, suffocating psychological horror it inflicts. The entire island is violently overgrown with hundreds of decaying, mutilated plastic dolls hanging ominously from every single tree branch. Their severed limbs, decapitated heads, and hollow, spider-infested eye sockets stare blankly at you through the dense, creeping fog. According to dark local legends, the dolls were frantically hung by a terrified hermit to aggressively ward off the vengeful spirit of a young girl who tragically drowned in the murky, dark waters nearby. The atmosphere here is heavily oppressive. Thick with the smell of rotting vegetation and a profound, chilling sense of being watched from the shadows. The dense, overgrown chinampas actively disorient visitors, turning the dark canals into a claustrophobic, inescapable maze. At night, the terrifying isolation is absolute. The silence is broken only by the eerie, unnatural creaking of the dolls twisting violently in the wind. The Island of the Dolls is a deeply traumatizing, psychological death trap, an impossible place where sorrow, madness, and intense, suffocating dread aggressively consume the very air you breathe. Seven, Pamukkale, Turkey. Pamukkale, famously known as the Cotton Castle in southwestern Turkey. From a distance, this sprawling, blindingly white cascading cliff looks like a surreal, frozen waterfall, or a massive, fluffy mountain of pure snow, violently defying the blistering Turkish sun. However, this mesmerizing, deeply photogenic landscape is aggressively built entirely of travertine, a hard sedimentary rock violently deposited by mineral-rich, superheated thermal waters. While it is marketed as a serene, healing paradise, the terrifying reality of Pamukkale is its incredibly deceptive and aggressively slippery nature. The dazzling, perfectly smooth white terraces are chronically covered in a thin, almost invisible layer of highly lubricated algae and flowing water, transforming the entire massive cliff face into a terrifyingly lethal slip hazard. There are absolutely no guardrails along the steep, crumbling edges of the deep thermal pools. A single microscopic loss of traction on the slick, wet calcite guarantees a violent, bone-breaking plunge over the jagged, razor-sharp terraced drops. Furthermore, the extreme, blinding reflection of the sun off the massive white rocks aggressively assaults your vision, severely inducing snow blindness and extreme disorientation in the sweltering, unyielding heat. Pamukkale is a stunning, beautifully deceptive natural trap, a highly polished, aggressively slippery staircase that elegantly disguises its capacity to deliver sudden, brutal physical trauma. Six, Chocolate Hills, Philippines. The Chocolate Hills in Bohol, Philippines. Stretching as far as the eye can see, this sprawling, surreal landscape is violently dotted with over 1,200 perfectly symmetrical, dome-shaped mounds. During the dry season, the aggressive sun violently scorches the lush green grass covering the mounds, turning them a deep, ominous shade of brown that gives the terrifying illusion of a massive alien graveyard or a vast field of colossal earthen blisters. The bizarre perfection of these hills actively defies natural logic, leading to deeply unsettling local legends of warring giants violently hurling massive boulders at each other. The true geological terror of the Chocolate Hills lies hidden beneath their uniform, chocolate-colored surface. These massive mounds are the remnants of a highly fragile, crumbling marine limestone formation that has been aggressively hollowed out by millions of years of violent acidic rainfall. The entire region is a highly unstable, deeply fractured karst landscape, severely riddled with unpredictable sinkholes, hidden caves, and massive underground rivers that actively threaten the structural integrity of the ground above. Wandering off the strictly designated viewing platforms is incredibly dangerous. The seemingly solid, uniform Earth can easily and violently collapse without warning, swallowing the unwary into dark, jagged subterranean chasms. The Chocolate Hills are a mesmerizing, highly unnatural optical illusion, a visually perfect landscape sitting precariously on top of a crumbling, terrifyingly hollow geological death trap. Five, Salar de Uyuni, Bolivia. Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. Stretching across an incomprehensible 4,000 square miles of the high Andes. This is the largest salt flat on Earth, a blindingly white, perfectly flat void that actively attacks the human senses. During the wet season, a thin layer of water transforms the expansive salt crust into the world's largest natural mirror, perfectly reflecting the sky and completely obliterating the horizon. This creates a terrifying, deeply disorienting optical illusion where up and down cease to exist, making you feel as if you are suspended in an infinite, inescapable void. However, the true horror of the Salar is the absolute, crushing isolation and extreme physical punishment it inflicts. Situated at a suffocating altitude of nearly 12,000 feet, the freezing, oxygen-deprived air rapidly induces severe altitude sickness. During the day, the blinding reflection of the sun off the pure white salt aggressively assaults your retinas, frequently causing painful snow blindness and severe sunburns within minutes. At night, the temperature plummets violently, transforming the salt flat into a freezing, desolate wasteland where survival without heavy gear is impossible. The fragile, highly deceptive salt crust hides terrifying, deep pools of freezing brine. Vehicles frequently break through the surface, plunging deep into the corrosive mud and leaving passengers stranded in a freezing, trackless nightmare with zero cellular reception. Salar de Uyuni is a breathtakingly beautiful, infinite mirror that silently threatens to disorient, freeze, and swallow you whole. Socotra Island, Yemen. Socotra Island, completely isolated in the brutal, shark-infested waters of the Arabian Sea, belonging to Yemen. Stepping onto this remote, jagged speck of land is exactly like crash landing on a profoundly alien planet that violently rejected Earth's evolutionary timeline. The island is aggressively dominated by the dragon's blood tree, a grotesque umbrella-shaped botanical freak with violently twisting, heavily knotted branches that bleed a thick, dark crimson resin when violently cut. The landscape is a deeply terrifying, unforgiving wasteland of jagged limestone plateaus, massive, shifting sand dunes, and deep, dark caves completely infested with venomous centipedes and aggressive, highly toxic scorpions. The absolute, crushing isolation of Socotra, separated from mainland Africa for over 34 million years, has bred a terrifyingly unique ecosystem where over a third of the bizarre flora and fauna exist nowhere else in the universe. The hostility of the environment is extreme. The island is frequently battered by brutal, devastating cyclones and hurricane-force winds that violently rip across the barren plains. There is virtually no infrastructure, no reliable medical facilities, and the surrounding waters are heavily patrolled by aggressive pirate factions and deeply unpredictable, treacherous currents. Socotra is a stunning, heavily guarded biological fortress, a deeply unsettling alien time capsule that actively punishes any human attempt to conquer its bizarre, unforgiving terrain. Three, Deadvlei, Namibia. Deadvlei, heavily hidden within the towering, aggressive red sand dunes of the Namib Naukluft Park in Namibia. The name literally translates to dead marsh, and it perfectly describes this terrifying, deeply apocalyptic white clay pan. Over 900 years ago, a massive, catastrophic drought abruptly cut off the flow of the Tsauchab River, violently plunging the thriving marshland into a state of absolute mummified death. Today, the glaring, scorched white floor is aggressively punctuated by the twisted, blackened skeletons of ancient camel thorn trees. The climate here is so brutally dry and intensely hot that the dead trees cannot even decompose. They simply stand frozen, scorched by the merciless, blistering African sun for nearly a millennium. The psychological terror of Deadvlei is rooted in its profound, suffocating stillness and the overwhelming, crushing scale of the surrounding environment. The stark, blackened trees are aggressively imprisoned by Crazy Dune, the tallest sand dune in the world, towering over 1,300 feet high and heavily locking out any possibility of escape or salvation. The heat inside this massive sand bowl frequently exceeds a lethal 120 degrees Fahrenheit, aggressively pulling the moisture directly from your skin and lungs. It is a haunting, intensely photogenic landscape of extreme desiccation, a chilling, silent graveyard where nature violently hit the pause button, perfectly preserving a terrifying moment of sudden, catastrophic death. 2. Danakil Depression, Ethiopia. The Danakil Depression in the brutal, hyper-isolated Afar Triangle of Ethiopia, recognized globally by scientists as the absolute cruelest, most hostile place on the surface of the Earth. The Danakil Depression is a terrifying, heavily fractured alien landscape aggressively formed by the violent tearing apart of 3 continental tectonic plates. Located more than 300 feet below sea level, this sprawling, apocalyptic wasteland is a relentless, bubbling nightmare of aggressive geothermal activity. The landscape is violently dominated by boiling, highly acidic thermal pools that glow with sickening, hyper-vibrant shades of neon green and toxic yellow. The surrounding air is suffocatingly thick, aggressively choked with highly poisonous chlorine and sulfur gases that violently burn your throat and lungs with every agonizing breath. The sheer, punishing heat is completely unbearable, with daily temperatures routinely and violently smashing past 125 degrees Fahrenheit, actively roasting the earth into a heavily scarred, desolate crust. The ground itself is highly deceptive. A single step onto the fragile, crystallized mineral bridges can violently plunge you into deep, boiling pools of flesh-melting acid. The area is completely devoid of drinkable water, shade, or any infrastructure, and it is heavily patrolled by deeply aggressive local militias in a highly volatile, war-torn region. The Danakil Depression is an aggressive, hissing vision of hell on Earth, a terrifyingly beautiful, highly toxic cauldron that actively attempts to poison, dissolve, and roast anyone foolish enough to trespass. 1. Door to Hell, Turkmenistan. The Darvaza gas crater, chillingly and appropriately known globally as the Door to Hell, located deep in the brutal, desolate Karakum Desert of Turkmenistan. For over half a century, this massive, 230-foot wide gaping wound in the Earth's crust has been aggressively, violently burning without a single moment of rest. The terrifying reality is that this apocalyptic inferno is entirely a catastrophic man-made disaster. In 1971, Soviet engineers recklessly drilled into a massive, highly pressurized underground cavern filled with explosive natural gas. The ground violently collapsed, creating a massive crater that aggressively swallowed their heavy drilling equipment. To prevent the massive, silent spread of highly lethal, suffocating methane gas to nearby isolated villages, scientists made the chillingly desperate decision to violently ignite the crater, naively assuming the fire would burn out in a few weeks. Instead, they unleashed a terrifying, unyielding monster that has been violently raging for over 50 years. Standing near the fragile, crumbling edge of this colossal fire pit is a deeply paralyzing, visceral experience. The intense, aggressive heat radiating from the violent, roaring flames is physically crushing, forcing you to step back from the terrifying drop. The suffocating smell of burning sulfur violently assaults your senses, while the violent, hissing roar of the burning gas completely drowns out all other sound. The crater is completely unbarricaded, and the unstable, crumbling sandy edges constantly threaten to collapse, silently offering to plunge the unwary directly into the roaring, inescapable fiery abyss. The Door to Hell is the ultimate terrifying monument to human arrogance, an aggressive, raging inferno that visually and physically embodies our deepest, most primal fears of eternal damnation. We have just journeyed through 25 of the most beautiful, yet fundamentally terrifying locations on the planet. From lakes of boiling acid to raging man-made infernos, these impossible places serve as a brutal reminder that Earth is not always a welcoming sanctuary. Our planet is a highly active, deeply unpredictable force capable of producing environments that are as visually stunning as they are lethal. They teach us a harsh but necessary lesson. Nature's most breathtaking wonders often demand our absolute respect and caution. Which of these surreal death traps surprised you the most? Would you ever risk your life to visit any of them? Let us know in the comments below. If you survived this descent into Earth's most dangerous anomalies, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. As a reminder, to safely bring you this close to Earth's most dangerous environments, some of the visuals you saw today were meticulously recreated using AI. Until next time, stay safe, respect the wild, and keep exploring.